Hey everybody, happy Sunday. I turned down my own feedback in my ears here. Give me just a second. There we go. That's a little bit better. How are you guys? Happy Monday. It's another Richard Reads, but we're starting a new. It's a Wild Richard. A Wild Richard has appeared, Hoku. And this Wild Richard is ready to start reading a new novel. You know, we finished Volition Agent last week, even had a little bonus reading of one of my short stories. And now we're going to get into Broken Trust. And as is customary, or recent customary, I'm going to read the back cover. It's right back here. Which the tagline for this novel is "No one survived undamaged." So that's the tagline for this. It's a post. I like to call it a post-apocalyptic novel that centers around what happens after we're done trying just to survive. This one's going to be a lot of fun for me. The location on this novel is very loosely based on my hometown. It's actually an area just outside of my hometown, like minutes outside. So I'm really excited to read it to you. But one of the cool things I thought we would do with this one that we didn't do with the other two novels is all four of my all four of my novels have book trailers. So, which, for those who don't know what book trailers are, they're promotional material that you put out, kind of like a movie trailer, to promote the book. And so I thought it would be really cool to play the book trailer for this before we got started with it. So the book trailers are all on my YouTube if anyone wants to come see them. I really, really love this book trailer. It's one of my favorites of the four that I have. In fact, I would say it is my favorite. I apologize if the sound goes totally loud when I switch over to it, but I don't usually do desktop sound on here, so hopefully it plays okay. But I thought it'd be really cool to show that. So we're gonna do that first. Then I'll read the book back cover, and we'll get started right into the novel. So let's jump over there. My BRB may come up. I'm not really gonna be right back. I'm right here, as you guys can hear. Let me turn on the display capture. There we go. So you guys should be able to see the YouTube video up there. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to shut up and let it play. So let me mute my mic and I'll get started. Okay, before I get started, thank you so much, Amy, for that follow. It's kind of stuck behind the display view, but it's there. But I appreciate, not the follow, but the subscribe. I appreciate that so much. For 4 months now, subscribe with Prime, basically since the start. Okay, let's get started with this. I'm going to mute this. I'm going to turn on my desktop audio here. I'm going to mute that. Okay, I forgot that I had BRB music on here. So I muted that. We'll start it over. What a bummer. Okay, we'll get it right this time. ago. I hope you guys enjoyed that book trailer. It's my favorite one. It's the only one I didn't make myself either, so that may be why it's my favorite. Um, but yeah, so um, let's dive into the reading. You like that, Hoku? It was really cool when I saw it. I really loved that book trailer. And you know, you could check out the other book trailers, but like I said, that's the only one I didn't make myself. So really, really stoked to get started on this novel because we're starting a new novel, and that's always fun. So like I said, I'll read. I don't read from the screen. I read from an actual book. Um, as you guys know, if you've been tuning in before, if you haven't before, welcome. I'm glad you're here. And we just got done seeing the book trailer for my this novel, Broken Trust. This is the third novel I published. Um, so let me just read the back. As I said, the tagline is "No one survived undamaged," and it basically says, "Earth is no longer teeming with human life. After a major mass extinction event, the world is no longer able to function as it once had. Governments have collapsed, and those that survived are left to figure out what is next for the human race." Liam Fisher never wanted to be a leader, but after finding survivors, protecting them, and founding the city-state of Lagoon Hills, the people demanded he be their leader. Instead, Liam agreed to sit on a council with four other leaders. Together with Talia Brooks, the other person the person who saved his life after the collapse, Liam runs the militia of Lagoon Hills. And though it was tough early on, the people of the city now live in relative comfort and safety. But Liam is fighting his own personal demons, the loss of his wife and unborn son. Rachel, a past lover he never really got over, has suddenly arrived at the city gates, and the mounting stress of a neighboring city-state threatening war. The people of Lagoon Hills are counting on Liam for their safety. Can he keep himself together and be the leader everyone wants him to be? Or will the people closest to him be the greatest threat of all? So that is our back cover. Um, Once again, I'm back to reading from my grandmother's copy of the book, although this was the only one I guess I didn't sign for her. I was kind of surprised that I didn't sign this one for her. The cover art of this is by Molly Rock, who is like a phenomenal, phenomenal cover artist. I could never afford her, but I won a contest. But she has have some very cool pre-made covers if you're in the business of writing and you want covers that are a steal really for the quality of work that she does. This was published in May 2014, and I dedicated it to my mother. It says, "Someday I hope to be the success you know I can be. Love you, Mom." And so then, of course, also, as you guys know, I start every novel with a quote. So here is the quote that I put at the beginning of this. "It is an equal failing to trust everybody and to trust nobody." English proverb. All right. Without further ado, let's jump in. Chapter 1. Overgrown brush on the side of the freeway and in the center divider obscured most of the landmarks Rachel was used to seeing when driving into her hometown. A few of the taller signs for fast food and gas stations could still be seen looming over the roadway. The thought of food made her stomach growl. She didn't dare stop on her 12-hour drive south. Rachel did have to stop once in the middle of a barren highway to empty her gas cans into the car, but made quick work to get back to driving. Restroom breaks were done by the side of the car, and only when she could simply hold it no longer. She'd been warned about bandits, gangs, and other dangers that might be out in the world now. Rachel was starting to regret her decision to leave the relative comforts of the military base. When the government was officially declared dead, they gave everyone two choices. First was to stay and make it on your own. There were still resources available on the base, but the truth was they'd be forced to fend for themselves before long. but they were already an established community, and there was a sense of security being on the base. Second was to accept a ration of fuel and food and make your way to wherever you wanted to go. For Rachel, this meant traveling alone and being exposed to a world she knew nothing about anymore. It was risky at best, but the ration for fuel was enough to get home, if there was anything left of it. The choice had been a tough one for Rachel. She had wanted to stay and wait for Phil to come home, but staying on the base reminded her too much that it was the military that stranded her husband in the deserts of the Middle East. There was no guarantee of protection on a military base, especially without the protection of American soldiers. The rumor had gotten out that several city-states had formed, and one in particular had conducted a successful raid on a military installation. The leader of that attack was someone Rachel had known, and it was who she decided to seek out. A deer jumped out across the road. She slammed on her brakes. The deer froze for only a moment before continuing to cross the road. A mountain lion leapt from its spot in the bush and took the deer down. Rachel watched as the big cat drug its prey into the brush. Rachel waited for her nerves to settle back down. Her hands shook. She wasn't just startled, she was downright on edge. She didn't have anything to protect herself from people, let alone nature. She took a breath and started down the freeway out of town. No one was in the cities anymore. It had been the case her entire trip down the I-5. Those that didn't die simply left. Rachel wasn't exposed to any of this. Her life was relatively unchanged until about 3 months ago, when the food shipments started growing slim and rumors came that what little remained of the federal government was disbanding. Now here she was, trying to find this one man based solely on a rumor she assumed had been exaggerated as it passed through multiple mouths. The freeway passed through a small set of brown hills. She let her eyes stray from the road and follow along the hills. Spots of green dotted them with trees. She continued to follow the rolling hills. She saw the sun glistening off of something. She stopped her car and got out, never looking away from the distant hills. She knew this area. There was a river and a small lake out there she'd been to so many times growing up. They called it a lagoon since the area was called Lagoon Valley, but it was just a lake, and not a very large one. But she couldn't see the lagoon, just some type of metal object that reflected the sun back at her. This was what she was looking for. Rachel ran back to her car. Hey, Hager, how's it going? What's up? Welcome in, welcome in. She turned around and headed back for the exit she had just passed. Even though she knew no one was on the road, driving the wrong way on the freeway didn't feel right. She turned off the freeway and went off through what would have been an on-ramp. Phil would have been furious if he knew she was looking for Liam. There was a history there, and Phil was never comfortable with it. But she didn't know of anyone from her past that was alive. She needed someone she could trust, someone to make her feel safe. The roads here were narrower, but she knew the right direction to head. She came around the first bend and saw 2 armed men gesturing for her to slow down. She slammed on the brakes and thought about turning around, but there wasn't enough room. There were 2 barriers in the road that would require slow maneuvers to get around. 2 large stop signs on either side of the road. She stayed perfectly still as the men approached her slowly. Fear began to seize her as she felt herself struggle for a bit of air. One of them kept his rifle pointed at her. The other approached her window. Rachel didn't roll it down. "What do you want from me?" she asked through the window. "I have no money, or really anything of value." "Money?" the man laughed. "Did you just climb out from under a rock? Money hasn't had any real use in years." Rachel had a hard time remembering that most of the country was in despair years before the military ever felt the impact. All that time she was waiting for Phil, the world around her was dying. Rachel only frowned and the man stopped laughing. "Where are you heading?" Rachel looked them over. They wore old clothes that had clearly been washed again and again. That was something she suspected from bandits. But these men looked well fed, and there was a military precision to them that Rachel recognized. For now, she'd have to just keep these men happy. They were the ones with the guns. Rachel wished she'd made the trip armed, but she was never one to keep guns, and people aren't willing to sell her one. She's sure she wouldn't really know how to be effective with one anyway. I'm not sure, Rachel was honest about that. I'm looking for someone. There aren't many someones left to find. The man looked into the back seat at the gas cans. Looks like you came a long way. I have. And from a military base. The man gestured to her vehicle sticker. The other man perked up and raised his rifle again. You're right. Rachel knew there was no point in lying. Angering these men might just get her killed. I'm not military, though. My husband was. But they left him in the desert to fend for himself. So why'd you come here? I grew up near here. I was hoping to find a friend or two. The towns are empty now and overrun with animals or bandits. Either way, no place to stay. Who are you hoping to find? Rachel wondered. If the rumors were true and these men were military, they might be enraged at the mention of Liam's name. Or, if they were bandits, Liam's name might scare them off. Rachel thought it over carefully. These men could be trained to protect the city-state. You're with one of the city-states? Rachel slowly rolled her window down. The best one, the man puffed up a bit with pride. Now, if you answer my question, I might be able to help you. Who are you looking for? An old friend. I've known him since high school. Rachel looked over at the other man. He relaxed a bit. Liam Fisher. The man tensed for a moment. It didn't seem to be from fear, but from understanding. He knew who that was. You know him. Rachel wasn't asking him. She knew he did. How do you know him? The man waved up to the hill. Rachel hadn't known a third man had been watching them from the hill. She saw him way back. Rachel knew enough to know he was the Overwatch. Thankfully, she hadn't tried anything stupid. Like I said, we were friends before things went crazy. That wasn't entirely true. He always claimed they were friends, but she hadn't even seen him in person in over 6 years. She'd kept him distant. I don't have anyone left, and I hoped he might still be alive. The man shook his head. Turn around and head back. I can't let you through. What? Why not? Rachel felt tears forming in her eyes. She'd come a long way. She really had no place else to go, and she didn't like her chances of surviving on her own. I just wanted a friend. I don't even have enough gas to get anywhere else. That was when all her emotions broke open. She missed Phil. She missed her home. She missed a simpler life, and she wanted to find a new home. The tears streamed down her face, burning her cheeks. She sobbed. There was nothing left for her if she couldn't get to Liam. She began to roll up the window. Wait. The man put a hand out. He shook his head and let out a big sigh. Fuck. I'll probably get into trouble for this, but Liam lives in the city. Head down this road until you reach the end. Turn right. As you crest the hill, you'll see the gate below. When you get to the gate, tell them you're here to see Liam. I can't promise the guards there will be happy to see you, but I'm sure they'll get Liam for you. The guard reached into his pocket and handed her a rag. She smiled at him and took it. Thank you so much. Rachel dried her eyes with the rag. She handed it back to the guard. He waved it off. Keep it. He took 2 steps back and called out, let her through. What we got today? I'm listening to this book while playing Animal Crossing. Not much. Feeling like shit today. I got my vaccine and I've been a mess. Oh man, sorry to hear that you're not feeling well, but at least you're getting that vaccine, Agar, huh? Yeah, sorry to hear that. Sorry to not hear you feeling well. Take a quick little scene break. Take a sip of water. As Rachel went over the peak of the hill, she saw the valley below. The valley was just as brown as the hills around it. She knew the winter rain would turn these hills into gorgeous bright green by spring. though there was still a lot of beauty in the brown. She could see the river that cut between the hills she was on and the hills that circled the valley below. The river appeared to disappear into a massive metal wall. Rachel's nerves began to catch up with her. Her stomach gurgled a little, but she had lost all desire to eat. She hadn't said much to Liam in years, and she didn't know how he would take her arrival. He shouldn't still give me butterflies, she thought. As the road drew closer to the gate, the size of the wall became more apparent. It ran at least halfway up the hill on either side. The metal clearly came from multiple sources. She could see a bit of faded advertising, some metal roofing, and there were large sheets of metal. But the wall didn't look patched together at all. The very look intimidated Rachel. Massive barriers made of concrete blocked the roadway again. Large signs read "Stop" and "Severe tire damage." She could see several, maybe as many as 10, armed men standing along the top of the wall. 5 more were on the ground. Again, a person who seemed to be in charge waved at her to stop. There was no real uniform, but the guards were dressed very similar to the guards that she met down the road. Only these ones seemed much more on edge. They had their rifles pointed at her. "Shut your car off," the one in charge yelled. Rachel did as she was told. "Throw the keys out the window." She did, watching her keys hit the road. Before she had a chance to turn back to look at the men, 3 of them were ripping her car door open. They threw her to the ground and restrained her with handcuffs. "Hey, you're hurting me," Rachel yelled. The sun was setting, but the asphalt was still piping hot, and most of her body was pressed against it. 2 men yanked Rachel up to her feet. They turned her to face the one she now knew must be in charge. "Why did you come here?" he barked. "I'm looking for someone," Rachel said. "Was all this necessary? A car comes driving up unannounced with military stickers. We don't exactly take any chances," the man said. "What's your name?" "Rachel Tabor," she replied. "Look, I'm not looking for trouble. I'm just trying to find Liam." Before she could react, the guard behind her knocked her to her knees, and the other guard put a handgun to her head. Rachel seized in fear, unable to speak. She knew she was about to die, and she felt so powerless. She began to well up with tears. "Military and looking for Liam. That's 2 strikes," the head guard said. "Why would Liam want to see you?" "We were friends," Rachel said. "Friends?" the guard chuckled. "Why are you trying to find him now?" "I came down from Washington. He's the only person I thought of that might still be alive." Rachel heard the hammer of the gun click back. She knew her life was over, so she said the first words that came to her mind. "We were high school sweethearts." The words were pleading, as if they could save her life. "What?" The lead guard came closer. Rachel felt the gun leave her head. "We were high school lovers. We dated all 4 years I was there." The guard stared at her for a long time. She lowered her head. The guard turned and walked away. The other 2 guards picked her up and walked her to the giant gate. The head guard made a gesture, and she could hear large bolts move behind the wall. As they got closer, a smaller gate within the large one slid open. Compared to the light outside, the inside appeared to be completely black. As they brought her in, she noticed it was not true at all. The inside was lit, but the lighting was dim. It took a moment for her eyes to adjust. The door behind them slid shut, and the bolts slid back in place. Ahead of her was another large gate, with a smaller gate inside. She assumed that led to town. But before they got to it, they turned to the right, and the lead guard opened another door and led her down a hallway. There was a room on the left and a row of rooms which looked like jail cells on the right. In the last of the cells, they pushed Rachel into it. The lead guard took off her restraints and pointed to the bench. She sat right away. She was alive and felt a huge amount of relief lifted from her, even if she was now in a prison. They'd spared her life, so she wasn't about to anger them. She simply kept quiet. The guard turned to leave the room. Just before the door closed, he turned back to face her. "I hope you're telling the truth. Otherwise, you'll be dead before the morning." All right. Chapter 2 time. Hope you guys are enjoying that. First chapter down. Liam stood looking over the map of the area that was laid out over the oak table in the middle of the security tent. The massive tent was large enough to hold large meetings, but right now it was just him, Talia, and a few advisors. A breeze blew gently through the tent, keeping the evening heat at bay. A faint scent of the evening meal could still be smelled from the nearby mess tent. Liam's stomach was still full from the meal. Talia leaned over the table, and Liam caught himself looking down her shirt. She looked up, and he smiled. She shook her head and looked back up. I still say the area they claim belongs to us. Talia crossed her arms. Her light brown hair would look golden in the sun, but in the lighting of the tent it seemed darker. Her hazel eyes met Liam's again. When she stood upright, she was a few inches shorter than him, but when she caught his eyes, he seemed the smaller person. And now, they're threatening to dam out our river. I don't really think the location they chose to dam is the issue. The river runs right through their borders. Liam pointed to the city-state of the Summersville on the map. Then he circled out the area they knew was Somerville's right to claim. He pointed to another spot along the river. If we really pissed them off on this border dispute, they could dam the river here, and over time, they'd have a nice lake here inside their lands, and don't have to come into our lands to use the river or create a lake. Talia nodded, but Liam didn't think she agreed. She'd probably give him hell for it later. She was his only friend and second in command. She had no problem telling him he was wrong, and he appreciated that, though he wondered if he'd accept it so easily if they didn't have the bond they had. Talia rarely wore anything resembling a uniform, and if it hadn't been for her, Liam would have already had uniforms made for the security team. Liam preferred the tight tank tops and cargo pants she wore now. Even though he knew he had no shot with her, he appreciated her body and regular fitness routine that gave her. The silence had settled long enough. Talia, you're going to tell me what you think, one way or another. Now is as good a time as any. She looked at the sergeant in the room with them and then uncrossed her arms. If we don't settle these border disputes we will have people infringing on our borders all over. We can't let Summersville people scare us. We can't let the Summersville people scare us with threats to dam the river. I don't have the standing army. They don't have the standing army to stop us, and Liam held up his hand. I'm not saying we need to let this go. They know we can crush them if we wanted to. But they're not going to let us know they are scared. But if we can avoid any bloodshed, that's the route we should take. Talia nodded again. I think we need to make our point, one way or another. We will. Liam turned to the sergeant. What does the council seem to think of the new message from Summersville? They think it's bold. The sergeant, Gordon was his name, turned to Talia. They share the commander's sentiment, though, but they trust your ability to lead. Liam let out a sigh of disgust. What's the point of a council if they always default to one man's way? There's only a council of leaders because you insisted, Talia said. The people here were perfectly okay with letting you lead them. That was never what I wanted. Liam turned away from the table. Liam hated being any type of leader. It was certainly one of the reasons he didn't have any friends. He didn't need any conflicts of interest coming up later. But it was more than that. He had helped the people find a safe home because he had the experience to know what to look for in a safe settlement, and it was the right thing to do. He didn't do it to have power. He barely wanted to be alive himself. Liam turned back around. He didn't want to reflect on the lows his life had hit in the past. I suggest we send a letter back to Summersville, one signed by the entire council. In that letter, we should respectfully disagree with their new border claims and ask to meet with them to discuss the matter. They'll expect you to author it, since you are the council member in charge of security and defense. They will feel the border disputes are... Gordon was interrupted by another sergeant rushing into the tent. The sergeant, Jameson, stood stiff. Salutes were not required. In fact, Liam had an order in place banning them, but some of the staff still felt the need to stand attention. Liam waved for Jameson to relax and then turned to Gordon. Talia and I will work on it. Just to be safe, see what the council says. If they agree, I'll have it written by the next council meeting in 4 days. Gordon nodded and went out the back end of the tent. Liam turned to Jameson, still standing attention. Will you please relax? He did. Sir, we had someone arrive at the gates. Liam rolled his eyes at the sir. We can't really take anyone else in unless they're a doctor or maybe an engineer. We were going to turn her away, but she asked for you by name. Jameson's gaze shifted to Talia, then back to Liam. Since the raid on the Air Force Base, a lot of people know my name, Liam said. Again, Jameson looked at Talia and shifted uncomfortably. She claims you used to be, lovers. Liam instantly knew where the discomfort shown by Jameson had come from. There were rumors about Talia and Liam, none of which were true. But after a few late nights in each other's trailers, they were only talking. Rumors were bound to start. Liam felt a bit of discomfort himself, but his came from the slight possibility that he really knew this person, and other than his wife, he'd really only had one other true lover. The chances it was her were small, but if it was, I didn't really have any lovers, Jameson. Her name is Rachel Tabor. Liam felt the stomach sink and his heart climb into his throat. It was her. He'd assumed she'd be dead like most everyone else he ever knew. He fought the urge to run out of the tent to her. If there was anyone Liam had ever wanted acceptance from, it was Rachel. Where is she? Talia finally spoke. In the trap area, the jail rooms, Jameson said. Should I bring her here? Talia looked at Liam. She gave him a quizzical look. Yes? No. Liam broke himself from his thoughts of the past. I'll go over there. I'll be there soon. Meanwhile, if there's anything left at the food tent, bring her some. I imagine she's very hungry from her trip from Washington. Jameson nodded and left the tent. Liam turned and leaned over the table, looking down at the map. He was excited to know that Rachel was still alive, even more excited that she sought him out. Then a sudden realization hit. He didn't even think to ask about her husband. For all he knew, Phil was here too. Liam suddenly felt guilt for thinking that way. Thoughts of his wife came to mind. He closed his eyes and could almost see her face again. He felt the knot in his throat grow. He fiddled with the wedding ring, twisting it around his finger. Liam couldn't suppress the urge to cry, and the tears slipped out. He felt the familiar hand touch his, Talia. He opened his eyes. Her beautiful hazel eyes gave him sanctuary, just as they had done when Talia found him at his lowest. She didn't say anything. She just stayed still while Liam stared at himself in her eyes. The lump in his throat receded, and he took a deep breath. Who is she? Talia said. We were high school lovers. She left me for another man who she later married. Liam looked down at their two hands joined. Talia let go. Liam kept his gaze on the ground. Kara said I never really got over her. Talia put a hand on his shoulder. When Liam looked up, she pulled him in close for a tight hug. She gave him a soft back rub and then let go. Did you stay in touch with her? I tried. Liam left it at that. He could spend a month going into the drama of their breakup. He knew enough about her to know where she was living and so on, but that was back in the days of social media. Funny that she'd seek you out now. I mean, why now? Liam hadn't really thought of that. In fact, now that he was essentially someone, here was Rachel back to see him. A little spark of aggravation started to fester in him. The same aggravation he had dealt with for years when he tried desperately to salvage their friendship. The same aggravation that he felt when he needed a friend he could trust and Rachel ignored him. I want you to come with me when I go see her, Liam said. There's a chance she isn't who she told the guard she is, in which case I might lose my mind. Of course, Talia smiled. I'd rather you clear your mind first. Why not go in about an hour or two? She'll still be there once the sun's gone down. Okay. Liam should have been worried about the clearing. Liam should have been more worried about clearing his mind than cleaning his RV, but he knew Rachel would need a place to sleep. He couldn't let her sleep in the jail until the council voted. The council would likely let her stay, provided he could find a use for her. Resources were tight, and everyone who lived in Lagoon Hills needed to have a job. If you didn't contribute, you were a drain on resources, and a drain on resources was deadly out here. Some people slept in tents, some slept in campers, but Liam was lucky enough to have an RV, a good-sized one too. He supposed it was their version of counselor's manners, or counselor's mansion. Actually, Liam had been slowly getting everyone into campers. Each time he went to town on a mission, he'd bring a few back. Surprisingly, few people wanted the campers. Some really enjoyed the tents. Sleeping under the stars was something they liked doing. Liam would have preferred something a bit smaller, like the small RV Talia had. The one she had was the one they'd taken when they'd left the city to search for a better place to live. Liam stopped when he got to Kara's picture by the kitchen table. He picked up the picture and looked at it. He gave it a soft kiss. He turned around and sat it on the table. I still miss you every day, hon, Liam said. I don't know how I've lasted without you for so long. But you were right when you would tell me that Talia was a good person. She may have kept me from meeting you again in heaven, but she really watches out for me. I really like what I'm doing. I really feel like I'm doing good work here. Rachel is here. I don't know why she came here to look for me after all these years. And I know you are not the jealous type, but I want you to know that I have to look out for her. She's my friend. And even if she was never a good friend to me, I have to help a friend, and I know you'd understand. There was a knock on the door, and then Talia walked in. She looked at him and then the picture he was holding. I can wait out front. No. Liam gave the picture another kiss. I love you, and I miss you. He set the picture back down and went back to picking up a few things. Talia went right to the couch and seat that she always sat in. I've never seen this place so clean. Talia rubbed her fingers on the end table. You even dusted. You didn't have to do all this for me. Liam just rolled his eyes. Liam just rolled his eyes. I know I was supposed to rest, but I couldn't just sit and let my mind wander. Talia didn't respond. Liam felt her watching him as he put the last few things away. When he finished, he turned around, ready for what she might say. She really did a number on you, this Rachel girl. Talia's voice was flat and matter-of-fact. Liam had not been ready for that. While Kara had known all about Rachel, Talia knew nothing about her. Talia had been the one to help Liam deal with the loss of Kara. Some say she ruined my life, though I never saw it that way. I wouldn't know about that. I didn't know you until some time later. But if that is even remotely true, don't you think we should just turn her away? Before Liam could protest, Talia put up her hand in defense. Now hold on. Hear me out. Liam leaned back against the counter. All right, I'm listening. You have a good thing going here. A really good thing. You're a trusted leader of a strong city-state, and your leadership is only making us grow stronger. Talia got up and stood at the counter across from him. If this woman is going to cause you any type of problems emotionally, or even if it's just bad karma, you should send her away. And if you can't do it, I'll tell Jameson to do it. She's my friend, Talia. I can't simply send her away. We can give her a ration of gas, send her to New San Fran. They are a strong city-state, and she would be safe there, Talia stated. I saw you at your lowest, and I just can't bear to think that this could come back and bite you. When you found me, You had enough food for one person to live on for 2 more days. You had no fresh water. You had nothing for yourself, but you still shared with me. And together we built this place. Liam put a hand on her shoulder. Anyone else would have left me to die, but you helped me. Because you're my friend. At the time, you barely knew me. We were casual acquaintances before the collapse. Liam walked to the door. I won't turn my back on Rachel. I have to pay it forward. Talia took a breath and went out the door. Liam followed her. Hello, Bob Ross. Sorry, I just saw that you came and now you're lurking. Thanks for dropping in, and I appreciate the lurk. Well, guys, what do you think so far? Have you guys noticed that the chapters are a little longer in this one than they have been in my past 2 novels? But we're gonna go into chapter 3. I hope you guys are enjoying the start of Broken Trust. Oh, that's right. Such a love triangle happening. You don't even know. You don't even know, Oku. All right, so 3. The meal they brought her was probably one of the best Rachel had this week. The taste of the baked beans was still in her mouth, and it made her long for a second helping. She wasn't about to seem rude in their kindness, though. She made sure to thank them again when they took the tray. Only a candle lit the cell now, and the dim lighting made Rachel a bit anxious to get out. There was something ominous about the lighting, like a prediction of doom. Part of her worried that the reason she got such a good meal was because it was supposed to be her last, but she tried to push that thought aside. She had to expect that Liam would come to see her. Her mind wandered a lot while she waited. First she thought of her friends she'd left behind. Friends wasn't really the right word. When you move as much as a military family does, you didn't really make true friendships. But nonetheless, these were people who had a similar lifestyle to hers, so she called them friends. Then she thought of Phil. She missed him and had really hoped he'd have come home by now. She felt guilty for leaving the base which was where Phil would come to look for her. But she had to assume he was stuck there and he wouldn't be coming home. She worried a lot about what Liam would say, what he might expect from her, or even more, what his wife would say. Despite the fact that she had ended their relationship for good reasons, she felt a little guilty for leaving Liam. However, she was a little excited to see him again. She knew deep down she still loved him, but she buried that away years ago. It was an old feeling that had no business being brought to the surface. She took a deep breath when the door unlatched and expected to see Liam waiting. Instead, there was the same guard that brought her food. This time, he had a blanket. Thank you, Rachel said when she took the blanket. When will I be able to see Liam? We've let him know you're here. I suppose when he has a moment, he'll come. The guard turned to leave. Could you tell me the time? Rachel hadn't been able to see outside to know. She could tell based on the lighting in the hall that it had to be after dark. It is almost 11. He walked out, locking the door behind him. Rachel sat back down and huddled in the blanket. She wasn't cold, but it gave her comfort. Rachel thought about the rumors that had circulated around the base the city-state had formed, that city-states had formed all over the U.S. She didn't see any on her trip south. She wondered if the number of these city-states could be exaggerated, and if perhaps the things she heard about Liam were exaggerated too. She found it hard to believe that Liam would attack and kill American soldiers on an American base. Liam was always a patriot. He had to put out the American flag, he got misty-eyed over the anthem, and he always spoke passionately about the troops. Rachel knew the way military wives always had a way of embellishing the facts. She suspected the case was true of Liam as well. Still, the idea of the man she once thought of marrying becoming some kind of killing monster scared her. The bolt on the door slid open. This time there was a soft knock. When Rachel didn't answer, the door slowly slid open. As soon as his head peeked in, Rachel recognized Liam. She stood up and smiled. Liam came in the room. He was a little heavier than she remembered, but he wasn't fat. She'd forgotten how much taller he was than her, just about a foot. His black hair was still styled the same way it was when she'd known him. He looked far less like a high school kid and much more like a grown man. "So it is you," Liam said. He came further into a room. A beautiful woman stood in the hall, looking in on them. She seemed to be looking over Rachel carefully. Rachel shifted her gaze when the woman's hazel eyes met hers. She was a very attractive woman. Liam stood rigid. Was he uncomfortable? He would hardly make eye contact with Rachel. She wondered if he even wanted to see her. "Yeah, it's me." Rachel thought about offering a hug, but she felt awkward and the moment passed. "How did you find me?" "I didn't know you were hiding." Rachel smiled to show it was a joke, but Liam didn't respond. "I just headed home, and, well, I saw your message that you headed west at your house. So I headed west. I saw the wall from the freeway and went to check it out." "How'd you get past my checkpoints?" Liam frowned. "They let me through." Rachel shrugged. Liam shook his head before turning to the woman in the hall. "Commander, come in here." Rachel noticed the commander's face. She seemed annoyed at being called by her title. She came in and stood face to face with Liam. "I want those men at the checkpoint replaced," Liam said to her, "and half rations of food for 2 days." "Wait, aren't you glad they let me in?" Rachel protested. "I don't think it's right for them to be punished for letting me see you." "How did you know I was still alive?" Liam asked. "You were not even shocked to know that I survived, even though 90% of the country didn't." "I don't see. The point is simple. You knew I was alive because you heard of the things I've done, and the fact that they would let a woman who claims to know me in a car with military decals pass them is a serious breach of security." Liam turned to the commander. "Talia, put them on a different assignment, maybe along the hill, but don't cut their rations." Talia gave a soft smile to Liam. She turned to face Rachel. "It's good to meet another friend of Liam's." Rachel shook Talia's hand. Her grip was strong and hurt Rachel's hand. Talia continued to smile, but Rachel could tell it wasn't genuine. In fact, it looked more like a warning. She watched as Talia walked out. Rachel saw that Liam watched Talia leave too. She let the aggravation get the better of her and said, "And how's Kara?" "Kara is dead." Liam's voice cut through Rachel as if he blamed her for Kara's death. "Where's Phil?" "I don't know," Rachel said. So it was going to be a tit for tat, she thought. Silence settled between them. Neither of them said a thing for a while. Rachel didn't like how blunt Liam was being. She really thought maybe he didn't want her around. He certainly didn't seem to care for her in any way. "I don't think you should stay in the cell." Liam's sudden dialogue startled Rachel. "But you won't have a place to stay outside. Only residents have homes, and it'll be at least a few days before the council can determine if you'll live here. I can offer you a place to sleep at my place, but if that doesn't work for you, you can stay here." Rachel didn't know if she'd really be comfortable sharing a place with him. There was something about him that she didn't like anymore, and there was part of her that was remembering the love they shared. She looked at the cot in her room. That wouldn't be comfortable over the course of a few days. "Thank you," Rachel said. "Could we go now? I'm very tired." Liam gestured to the door. Rachel walked out first. Liam followed behind, leaving the door to the cell open. Their footsteps echoed through the metal halls. Instead of going the way she'd expected, Liam led her further down the hall to another side door. They passed through a changing room, a dining room, and went past a bathroom to a small door. Each room was as plain as the one before it. Rachel stopped in her tracks when she saw the once familiar lagoon. Tents, campers, and RVs could be seen everywhere. Some of the tents were very large, some were very small, but the same could be said of the RVs. She saw several large bonfires burning in various spots. She didn't see any structures other than the wall. Liam gestured for her to follow him, and she did. The dirt path they walked down was worn and clearly well traveled. Rachel saw several people waving to Liam, and a few said hello. Even those that didn't acknowledge him stopped to see where he was going. Many of them paid special attention to Rachel. People know you here, Rachel stated her observations. Everyone here does, Liam waved at a small family. They trust me. Popular? She didn't mean to sound so sarcastic. I wouldn't say that. Liam turned to look at her while they walked. Talia and I led these people here. I guess you could say we founded this city. You're their leader? No, no, no. Liam shook his head. The council is the leader of all of us. I'm just one member. Oh. Talia looked around at more of the tents. Seems they think highly of you. I do what I can for them. Silence settled between them again. The number of people on the paths was slimming down. She saw a few men sitting in front of a tent laughing. Another group of women were putting clothes on a line. She saw a couple kissing and giggling before slipping into their camper. You mentioned the council. They will decide if I can stay here? Rachel asked. They will. Liam's voice stayed matter-of-fact in tone. Rachel was getting tired of this terse answers. Do they turn people away? They have? Who are they? The Council of Leaders? I'm in charge of safety and security of our city. We have a medical leader, a food leader, a utilities leader, and a logistics leader, Liam said. Rachel watched as two more women stared at her before whispering to each other. Are you elected? Oh, no way, Liam waved off the idea. Survival is too important to trust to a popularity contest. So, do you think they'll let me stay? Rachel was genuinely worried about this. She had nowhere else to go. The main thing they'll look at is how you can contribute to our society. Supplies, food, and water are all in delicate balance. So anyone who lives here has to have a purpose here. Liam stopped at a group of motorhomes. Do you have any skills? You did spend the last few years as a homemaker. Rachel didn't like the way he said it. It made it sound like she didn't do anything. I can help out. We have plenty of child care, cooks, and cleaners. We have plenty of teachers, too. Liam walked up to the mobile home and opened the door. He gestured for her to come in. You should dig deeper into the skills you have. Rachel looked around the place. It was nice, but she was surprised that a leader of these people stayed in an RV. You live here? Were you expecting the governor's mansion? Liam let the door swing shut. Perhaps you should have stayed in the safety of the base if you wanted a house. Rachel took offense to that. Now, if you don't want me here, just say so. You've been snipping at me since we met, and it isn't helping. Liam nodded. If I didn't want you here, I wouldn't have invited you. Liam walked in the back of the RV. Presumably that was his room. Rachel noticed a picture of Kara on the counter. She recognized her from the pictures she had seen on social media years ago. She looked remarkably similar to Rachel. It was something that had bothered her when she first heard they were dating. But later, she realized it was her choice to end the relationship, and she should be happy that Liam found Kara. She wasn't going to ask Kara how Kara died, not tonight anyway. Liam walked back out, and Rachel quickly turned away from the picture. Liam had several blankets and a pillow in hand. He set them on the couch and went right to work converting the table into another bed. Rachel went over to help him, though she didn't really know what she was doing. When the table lowered suddenly, Rachel lost her balance. Liam caught her, though she probably wouldn't have fallen. For the first time in countless years, Rachel found herself staring into his eyes. She caught her breath. In an instant, Liam let her go. Though the moment seemed to last a bit longer, she went back to laying out the cushions, and he made the bed with a blanket and a pillow. Honestly, I'm glad you came. Liam broke the silence. The world is a dangerous place, and the fact that you're here means I know you're alive and safe. Rachel felt her cheeks start to burn. With, with her light complexion, she surely was blushing. I just hope I can stay. I don't really have anywhere else to go. Tonight, all you should worry about is sleep. Liam walked down to his room. Good night. It is a good night, Rachel thought. Okay. 3 chapters down. We're going to read one more before we call it a stream, even though we're going to go over, but that's okay. A few extra minutes. What's a few extra minutes among friends? Liam ran back and forth from his office to the front room where Kara lay on the living room floor. His cell phone wouldn't call 911, and the house phone, they only put them on hold. Deep down, he was scared to relive the nightmare, but couldn't force himself awake. It hurts, Liam, Kara said. The blood had pooled around her now. There seemed to be so much. Liam rushed to get a towel. All he could think of was how to stop the bleeding, but every time she had another contraction, more blood showed up. Liam tried to get her to the car, but Liam tried to get her to the car when he was first put on hold, but she only bled more. 911, what is your emergency? A very tired female voice said. My wife, she's gone into labor and she's bleeding everywhere. You need to get her to a hospital. That's why I called you. I need an ambulance, Liam screamed. Sir, all the ambulances are dealing with the outbreak. I can't spare one for some time. Liam, I feel faint, Kara said. Liam knelt down beside her. He gazed into her brown eyes and ran his hand through her hair. Hang on, okay? I have to go, Kara said. Save the baby. Whatever you do, save the baby. No, hon, stay with me, Liam begged. He tried desperately to wake from the dream, praying to be awoken before he had to relive the moment his wife died. I can't any longer, Kara said. I love you. You and the baby will have a good life. Please, take care of yourself. I love you. Kara's eyes lost all focus. Her breath stopped. Liam tried to get the baby out, but when the baby finally slid out, he was blue. He wasn't breathing. The 911 dispatcher had long since hung up on him. Liam tried everything. He did CPR on both of them, alternating between the two. Finally, exhaustion gave in, and Liam collapsed next to his wife. Liam jumped from his bed, his breathing ragged, and he was covered in sweat. He cursed and threw the nearest thing he could find, a pillow, at the wall. Then he collapsed and cried into the bed. He knew what happened next. The ambulance eventually arrived, about 4 hours later. The paramedics saw him there, crying next to his dead wife and child. They knew she was dead, so they simply turned around and left for the next call. They never once said a word to Liam. He used to curse himself for not getting Kara to a hospital, but Talia had already told them that would have done little good. The hospitals were too crowded. So many had died in the waiting rooms, just trying to seek help. I failed you, Kara. I couldn't even save our son, Liam thought. There was a knock on the back door of the trailer. Liam forced himself off the bed. He took his handgun from the nightstand. Liam, you okay? Talia whispered through the door. Liam slipped on his sweatpants. It's open. Talia opened the door slowly. She peeked in before entering. The first thing Liam noticed was the gun she held. The second was her breast poking against a t-shirt she clearly just thrown on. Liam felt guilty for looking at his friend this way, and only moments after crying for his dead wife. He was a man, but he felt like such a pig at the moment. His guilt turned to more tears, and he slumped back on the bed. Talia set her gun down and came to sit next to him. She rubbed his back until the tears stopped. Liam took a shaky breath in. You had the nightmare again? Talia held Liam's chin up. It's been a while. A long time. Liam looked away again. Months at least. Almost a year. Talia used to check on him regularly when she heard him having the bad dreams, though she'd never brought a gun before. And the gun? Liam nodded his head in the direction it was at. I heard a commotion and, well, Talia didn't say anything else. You don't like Rachel, Liam stated. Talia took a breath. I don't even know her. So who did you think was in here then? Fine. It isn't that I don't like her, but well, I was worried about you. Is that so bad? Talia shrugged her shoulders. I was half asleep. Liam thought back to the time Talia found him. He was in the backyard, knelt down between the two graves he dug for his family. He was about to take a full bottle of prescription meds and slip right into death. Many others in the neighborhood had done the same in the months after the government had collapsed. The outbreak had been contained and was virtually eliminated, but the damage was done, and most of the world wasn't ready for that. Liam didn't care that the world was over. He didn't care that the TV was off and the radios only made static and the power wasn't coming back on. The lack of running water, the foraging for food, and the constant fear of raids didn't bother him either. It was his dead wife and son that had pushed him to the brink of suicide. We didn't really know each other, Liam said. Talia seemed confused by the statement. Liam smiled. When you found me, you didn't know me. We used to work together. And you never said more than a few words to me, Liam said. We knew of each other, but the point is you could have let me kill myself. You didn't need an extra person in a survival situation. Talia hesitated before saying, and what kind of friend would I have been then? We weren't friends then. Sure we were. We just didn't know it yet. Talia wrapped his arm around him and pulled him tight for a sideways hug. She stood up and headed for the door. Sun'll be up soon. I'll check back in a couple of hours and we can do some rounds. Liam stood up. He caught a glimpse of a smile from Talia. He couldn't help but smile back. Thank you, Talia. You've been some kind of guardian angel for me. Talia only winked and walked out. How did you find this place? Rachel had been a non-stop question machine since she woke up. As they made their way to the meal tent for breakfast, she kept at it. I hardly found it. I just remembered it from the drives I'd taken here. Liam remembered it most from the times he'd taken Rachel here. I just recognized the large-scale survival advantages it had. Lots of water, Rachel said, and the fact that it's surrounded on three sides by tall hills. Many city-states are still building defenses, and even they are not adequate. My posts can spot troop advancements on our city miles away. They have two choices, fight me up a hill or get funneled through the main wall. Liam's voice beamed with pride. We've not had one raid by the nomads or drifters, and the only people to try and take us on retreated before they were a quarter up the hill. Is there a lot of fighting among people? Rachel asked as they got in line for food. For us, the drifters are our biggest threat. Liam saw Rachel give him a look. He hadn't seen that look in years, but knew right away she didn't accept that answer. Fine. There have been tensions among city-states, but we try and stay out of it. The resources are limited, and only a few of us have started any kind of farming. Not every place picked the best spot for that. Occasionally, we have to deal with a group imposing on our area. As Rachel approached the cook, he put his hand up. Liam, I don't know her. Liam nodded. The council hasn't met her yet. She's our guest. You know the drill. The cook didn't speak with much authority. Food is scarce. Give her half my ration, Liam said, and until the council decides, consider half my daily ration hers. The cook nodded and filled her bowl halfway with oatmeal. As Rachel moved down the line, the cook filled Liam's bowl. It's on me. Liam dumped a little more than half back in the pot. Thank you, but I'll just take what's mine. The cook smiled. You're a good man, he leaned in. You found yourself a cute girl, too. Ah, so the rumors have traveled that fast, huh? Liam laughed and walked over to the table Rachel sat at. He intentionally didn't address the rumors. What was that all about? If you want to eat, it has to come out of someone's share, Liam said. If you stay, everyone's shares might get a little bit smaller, since it's rare to find a bit more food. I can imagine more than a few people won't want me here then. Rachel took a small bite of her food. Being that I'm just a drain. You really need to think of something to justify your worth. Liam paused. To the group. They need a reason to keep you here. Liam let the silence fall between them. He really didn't want to see Rachel cast out, even if he could see she got to New San Fran safely. The fact that the city took in everyone simply means that, sooner or later, they'd get too big. And too big means death out here. He had only spoken to Rachel a little over the years, and most of what he knew about her and had come from social media. But he knew she finished school to be a teacher, but never worked anything more than a part-time job. Once she married Phil, she didn't need to work. It meant she had a great education with no practical skills for the community. Wish I'd gone to medical school, Rachel joked. Liam smiled. We meet in 3 days. You have some time. Rachel went back to her food. Liam checked his watch and then stood up. I have to go. When you're done, feel free to wander around, but stay in town and off the hills. Where are you going? I have to meet Talia, Liam said. Oh, any chance I can come? No, I'm afraid not, Liam said. I'll see you back at my RV tonight. Liam left the meal tent. He went jogging away as soon as he left. He was already running late enough. All right. 4 chapters down. So I hope that you guys are enjoying the start of this novel, Broken Trust. Like I said, wrote back in 2014, and I'm hearing some of these things that I wrote about back then, and I'm thinking, ooh, that's kind of scary. In terms of virus outbreaks and governments falling apart and that kind of shit. So we will be back next Monday, of course, with more Richard Reads. We'll start off right into chapter 5. We'll read again for another hour or so. If more. Don't stop reading. If you jumped in late or whatnot, you can always catch the VOD to get caught up, or you can always, I go put these up on YouTube as well, so there's always an opportunity to catch up on the readings. I do invite you to check out my YouTube at some point. You can see the other book trailers as well as past Richard Reads. We've already completed 2 novels, which is hard to believe. We've already read through 2 novels on Richard Reads. And I only got 4, so we're going to be running out soon. But I decided to read them in the order I wrote them. So like I said, this is the 3rd one that I wrote. So, and I already can kind of feel a little bit of the change in my writing style over the first 2. The chapters are much longer than what I used to write for chapters. So, but definitely a lot of fun to go back to this one. I've already kind of, as I'm reading it, forgot about a few things that started up in this. So, definitely a lot of fun to read these with you guys. So yeah, I will not babble on very much longer, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope to see you guys back next Monday for more Richard Reads. Please let me know, how, what you guys think of these readings and what have you. And of course, we'll keep them going. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great rest of your Monday night. And if I don't see you sooner, we'll see you back next week for more Richard Reads. All right. Thanks, guys.